Before this chapter in my physics course, my knowledge of how nuclear energy works was limited to what I saw in movies and a very basic lesson in my previous school years. Together, they taught me this. Nuclear energy is formed when a neutron is shot towards many other atoms. This creates a chain reaction. When controlled, it can produce energy, but in some situations, it can create a very dangerous weapon, the nuclear bomb. These bombs not only explode, but also leave a very large wave of radiation over their surroundings. Exposure to radiation could cause mutation, sickness, and in cases of exposure over a long period of time, death. From what I knew, there was no way to protect yourself from radiation except to get as far away from it as possible. I know now that there are shields and, in some circumstances, ways to contain the radiation. As for nuclear events that actually happened in the world, I only knew of the bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima during World War II. I also knew a little bit about the Manhattan Project, but only that it was a research project that eventually created the nuclear bomb. Because I was unaware of the advantages of nuclear energy, I thought it was a very dangerous way of producing energy that should be discontinued. What's your perception of nuclear energy?
I think nuclear energy is generally a good source of energy because it's relatively clean relative to other sources, but it has, of course, its dangers. There's still a lot of waste that goes in that is produced from nuclear energy. We don't have good solutions to get rid of that waste, and of course there is always a heightened possibility of nuclear accidents, which could be a real problem. But generally speaking, we need a lot of energy sources, and nuclear energy can be a good alternative.
What image of mutations have movies created of nuclear radiation?
Well, the movies that I've seen, mainly some skin problems and burnings that I've seen, but if we're talking about mutations, there might have been some birth defects where you're missing a limb or some of these other consequences of exposure to radiation.
What's the difference between nuclear fusion and fission?
Nuclear fission is the process of separating the atom into two, or the nucleus into two, in order to produce that releases a lot of energy, usually done with uranium. And the process of nuclear fusion, it means forcing together two atoms in a way that then as well produces a huge energy release, and that has been done mostly with hydrogen atoms.
What is your perception of nuclear energy?
I think nuclear energy is a useful tool for managing society's energy requirements, and it uses likely fewer emissions than many other sources such as oil and gas. It has many downsides, of course, because the nuclear energy is associated with significant risk if it's not managed appropriately, and if there aren't enough safeguards, which are very expensive for our economy, then you always risk problems with explosions and potential death of people around nuclear energy plants. Having said that, at least in Ontario, there are reasonable safeguards, and enough resources have been put into understanding the use of nuclear energy to be able to safeguard from most accidents. And compared to the accidents and problems that occur with discovering and also using oil and gas, I think that the balance probably tips in favor of nuclear energy.
What events do you know of that are linked to nuclear energy?
Well, there are several. Since we've been talking about nuclear power plants, the one that sticks in my mind most is an explosion at a nuclear power plant in Chernobyl in Ukraine, and that caused a lot of deaths and problems from radiation fallout, and that continues. So that was a major event in the 1980s. It affected me in particular because I was in high school, and I thought that meant that that could happen anywhere, and that, of course, has had repercussions even here. Otherwise, other nuclear events have been related to nuclear bombs, and Hiroshima is one example of that, where the principles of nuclear energy were used to create a bomb that also caused very significant death and destruction that continued for many, many years afterwards, and into generations beyond those that were directly affected by the bomb. Otherwise, we use nuclear energy regularly here. There are 3 power plants that I know of in the southern Ontario region, and then I think there are 1 or 2 other power plants in northern areas that contribute to some of our power needs.
Some trends in the perception of nuclear energy are that it is an important energy source for a modern society. Although it has its risks, it's an energy source that causes less pollution than others. The risks associated with nuclear energy are also becoming less significant as we continue to explore this energy source. I think that these perceptions can be changed by further informing people on the subject. When comparing nuclear energy to other energy sources, it has many advantages, such as the low gas emission and the quantity of energy produced. Although the risks are significant, they are very rare, and with the modern technological advancements, they are easier to prevent. I have learned that nuclear energy produces a significantly smaller amount of pollution than I originally thought, and that the risks are controllable. I previously mentioned that I thought nuclear energy was dangerous and the risks outweighed the advantages, but in this lesson, I have learned that the risks are avoidable and nuclear energy is a primarily good way to produce energy.